Hey, my babies. So, those of you all that have been following me for a while may have heard me touch on the fact that I was raised in a haunted house. And being raised in a haunted house was very normal for me. And I didn't realize that certain things were not normal until I got a little bit older and I started visiting people's homes who didn't have ghosts or other spiritual activities going on in them. And so I recently had another one of those this is only normal because you grew up in a haunted house experiences. So let me share it with you. Now, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, 106th and Wentworth to be exact, which is considered the Roseland area. And while this was just my experience in the Roseland area, Chicago in historical circles is kind of known as the city that was built on graves, because between cemeteries being moved and them cutting corners and just moving headstones and leaving bodies, and then mass unmarked graves, and various neighborhoods of the city were built on top of these graves, unfortunately. And so in the Roseland area where I lived, there was a cemetery called the First Roseland Reformed Church or something like that. And when it closed down or was being relocated, this church had a cemetery, and there was a newer church with cemetery that was accepting the bodies that were being moved from the Roseland Reformed Church. And at this time, a lot of the grave markers were made of wood, and some of them were just so deteriorated that a lot of those markers, just due to wear, tear, time, and the harsh climate of the Chicago area, some of these markers didn't even exist. So these workers, quite frankly, did not even know that there was a grave right there. But they also, back in those days when it was time to move a cemetery, because of the work and the labor and, you know, other things, they would often cut corners and just move the headstones and leave the bodies. But also when it came to the Reformed Church of Roseland, there was an issue where the bodies needed a certain certificate to be moved. And some of these people who were laid to rest there, they either didn't have any family left to get the certificate for their body to be moved, or they did not have the money for this certificate. So in that instance, those bodies were just left behind, and then homes and businesses were built on top of them. My grandfather even shared a story with us about the time that Chicago had such a really bad flood that pine boxes just came up out of the ground and were floating down the street of populated neighborhoods. And so, yes, the home that I grew up in and a couple of our neighbors' homes around us, we had active homes, and it was something that was very common. Everybody knew about it, but we kind of treated it like Bruno. We just didn't talk about it, and we kind of did what we had to do. And so there were certain rules and things that we did to accommodate the fact that we lived with ghosty ghosts. So this past weekend, I was at a friend's house, and their mom called my name from a little bit of a ways away, and my response was, huh? And she kind of gave me a look, and I had to immediately explain to her that I was not trying to be rude, but these are just things that I grew up with. So with my house being haunted, there's certain things that we just did. So obviously most of you all were raised that if someone calls your name, it's yes, yeah, yes ma'am, no sir. I was taught the exact opposite. Huh? What? Or just coming when your name is called was the answer that we had to give. Now, our home was very, very active, and it was actually pretty cool because we just kind of lived with another family. So most of the things that we were experiencing were kind of more like time bleeds, because we lived in our home and there was another family that lived in our home. We were just coexisting in two very different time frames. However, when you have earthbound spirits in your home, it can attract other entities to that space, and not all of them mean you any well. And so I was taught that if someone calls your name, you just come, or huh, or what, because a spirit is not going to respond to a what or a huh. You trip them up. And so with that being said, if you hear your name being called, you giving an affirmative answer like yeah, yes, yes ma'am, yes sir, that could be seen as giving that most of the time malefic entity permission to invade your space. And so when I would hear my grandmother's voice or my grandfather's voice or my mom's voice, I would come and I would be like, did you just call my name? If that answer was no, we were immediately told to go check the bowl. And I have a story for the bowl later on too. And so with that being said, it just kind of looks like I wasn't raised right, because I'm either going to say what, huh, or I'm just going to come when you call. And I teach my daughter to do the same thing. It's just what we did growing up in the house with Ghosty Ghost. And it was comforting. It wasn't scary at all. It's so much comforting in the fact that my mom bought a house solely because both of us felt a spirit. Now, when we relocated down here to North Carolina and my mom was buying a home, we went and looked at multiple homes, and it was this one house. When we got in the car, my mom, it was kind of silent, and she was like, did you feel a spirit in there? I was like, yeah. She said, how did it make you feel? I said, like, really comforting, like pop. And she was like, yeah, my mother bought that house mainly due to the fact that there was a spirit living there. Like, it's our comfort zone. It's a nice house, but the fact that there was a spirit there was the thing that made her buy this house. And even the home that I live in now, because of where I live, unfortunately, this is part of the Trail of Tears. And so there is 2 children that live with us very happily. And so I teach my daughter the same thing, because we live with Ghosty Ghost. It is a possibility that there may be some malefic entity that's attracted to the home. So yes, y'all know me. Of course, I'm gonna do my protection work, but my daughter is raised that if you hear someone call your name, you just come, what, or huh. Perfectly acceptable response in our home. So if me or my daughter ever come to your house and you call our name and that is how we respond, I promise you we were raised right. Just had to be raised a little bit differently, because we grew up with Ghosty Ghosts. And so yeah,